Hi and welcome to Idea Sex Live. This is Elfie. I am talking about a very, very cool TED Talk actually that Esther Perel did. And I just wanted to expand on some of what she's talked about, as well as actually cover her main points, because it is a really amazing message that I believe needs to be heard. And so Esther Perel, thank you, Jarvis. 2000 hours. Esther Perel is a relationship expert, and she's a psychotherapist as well. And she talks about how to maintain desire in relationships, particularly long-term relationships, because what happens is, we have these relationships that start off amazing, and we have great sex, and it's all awesome, and there's romance and everything, and then eventually, you get married, and maybe you have kids, and obviously the desire can start to drop off after a little while. So, just to cover some of the basics of what she talks about, as well as to expand on it, I'm just going to go into some detail right now. But I'd love to know from you guys, what are your thoughts on this particular topic, and have you got any other ideas or thoughts around how to maintain desire in a long-term relationship, or even just long-term knowing somebody, keep that excitement there. So she basically says that great intimacy doesn't guarantee great sex, especially in the long term. And we basically have two fundamental desires or needs in us. And one is safety and security, and the other one is adventure or variety. So the whole concept of even having a passionate marriage was basically a contradiction. Um, Back in the day, we had like villages that would essentially provide all these different people, these different concepts and things that we need, these needs that we have, like belonging, identity, continuity. And now we're kind of expecting a partner to do all of that, as well as give us, transcendency and mystery and even awe, all in this one person. And I'm definitely one of the most guilty people of trying to create that in a singular being, and the amount of expectation it puts on somebody, the amount of pressure, and then the amount of disappointment that does come along by not, actually having a network of people and friends, or just people that we can have these kind of experiences with, and these kind of um, senses of belonging, identity, etc. with, and particularly also if we don't have it within ourselves. And I did a video a few days ago about how to do that, how to not to be codependent. So you can go back to that video and check that out. I'll reference it down below. In the meantime, let's go a bit further forward. She basically outlines that this crisis of desire is actually one of imagination, really, underneath it all. That we just need to be able to be open to the idea of changing things up, and not just that, but actually have that person be in and of their own self, like an interdependent being, and having their own lives. That's when they've done studies of this across, like hundreds of different tribes and even cultures, and the common thing that comes up is the biggest turn on for somebody is to see somebody else, like their partner particularly, being radiant and confident. That's what actually produces that desire, even if you already have that sense of familiarity, even if you're married in the same house. It's having these two distinct lives that fuels that desire and keeps it very interesting in the long term. So, this whole idea of how do you create consciously comfortable distance with that person, so that that you can not have a sense of attachment and needing to be with that person. So, very important note she brings up as well is that wanting is a turn on, but needing is a turn off. So, guys, if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them down below to expand on these things. I can talk from my experience, and particularly this is something that I'm really learning. So what we're here to teach. We're here to teach what we we teach what we are here to learn. So welcome, Amanda, to the cast. Um, just say hey night's been, and maybe comment on what I've been talking about so far. So wanting is a big turn on, but needing is a turn off. So how do we maintain? And this is a question for us here. Like, how do we maintain want with a partner, but not have that turn into a need? Because then the neediness really does turn all of us off, really. And I think one of the best things that we can do is focus on ourselves, our mission, and really spread our focus across many different friends, activities, networks. And I think this also applies to tribes as well. And if we go to the same church every week, or we go to the same dance place every week, then it can start to kill off the desire we have for that particular activity. So this is really expanding on what she said. This is not what she's referenced in her video, but when it comes to going to the same dance every week for 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 times a week, we might start to think that it's the dance itself that we're not enjoying anymore, and we maybe should try a different activity altogether. Whereas it could just be we need to, experience a different form of dance, a different night with a different teacher. Welcome, Rory. How you doing, man? So these two contrasting things, we need to actually be able to maintain this cognitive dissonance to be able to keep the desire and the love in a relationship. Because obviously, if we go too far the other way, then we're going to start, losing the whole, compassion and caretaking and beautiful, romantic or intimacy that we get from just really knowing somebody, that familiarity, that sort of being fully known by someone, or at least a hell of a lot more known than anyone else in the world knows us. That is precious. So true interdependence will be able to bring harmony to those two aspects, I believe. So beautiful comment, just a straight out line. She said, sex isn't something you do, it's a place you go, right? So this whole idea of it being an activity, it's like, I mean, man, the amount of times it's become, okay, we're just, we're in bed now, we're lying down, so it's time to have sex. That kind of approach to eroticism overall isn't one that's going to keep you both excited in the long run. So, to look at this, we need to go back to the original idea of eroticism, and it's, basically it's sexuality transformed by the human imagination, that we as human beings are the only people who can actually really get off with just the idea of having sex rather than having to actually do it. So play with that in our relationships. Don't make it just this event that happens, this block of time, sex night. Man, I had sex night every week, man. I've been there. I feel the pain of it, right? And the best way to do it is just treat it as an overarching backdrop to life. Again, this is me talking here. But like a backdrop to our interactions, have that underpinning buzz of sexuality always there, and then that way you can amp it up. It's like a dial, man. Like, it's not an on-off switch where we just bam, we're having sex now. I don't know, us guys, we can fall into that trap of bam, we're having sex now, but even we can attest to the idea of a truly satisfying sexual experience doesn't just happen on and off. There's a build up to it. There's an amping up of this dial until you end up, crossing that line called sexuality that we do because we like making lines. And then obviously the actual act, the physical sexual act begins. So, any thoughts on eroticism, people? Anything that you can contribute to the conversation? Love to hear from you. Even if we're not friends on Facebook, please feel free to chime in. Love to hear from you. And we can connect on Facebook too, by the way, if you want to stay in touch with me and be aware of when these new lives are happening every day. I've been doing them. So, love you to subscribe and to get notifications on it. Should say down below, you can get notifications on these casts. So, the final couple of points before I have to go. Welcome to the cast, John, Mr. Bavoni. Love your thoughts as well, man, on maintaining desire over time. So, here is the key thing, I think, from her entire message. The biggest thing that stood out to me was, rather than looking at what turns one on about, like, so when you have this conversation of like what's turning you on, right? When we go, what turns you on, a lot of the time the focus is on, well, what turns me on is when you do this, or what turns me on is when this happens. And really turning on is an internal thing. It's an internal process. And if we can get really absolutely self-aware, and if we can invite the other person to become self-aware around what truly turns themselves on within themselves, it could be it could be that you get turned on when you've had a great day at work, or when you feel confident, or when you feel like you've just had a win. I know I get turned on, with the idea of challenge. So, what state within the self creates the turn on. And once we can get clear on our own state of what creates a turn on, then we can start to inquire with our partners about what turns them on. So big one there. So I think that's the biggest one I'm going to leave it on, actually. But we have got a lot of people on the cast now, so please feel free to ask some questions. I've probably got 2 minutes left in me before I really got to go. So I'll just finish off with a couple of her final points before I finish the cast off, unless any questions come in. So, healthy selfishness. So this is a big one. So the way to deal with neediness within a relationship is to go, okay, how can I be completely connected with myself, but still like in the presence and be present with the other person? So not needing their presence or their attention or their validation, but being completely validated and a self-sustaining being in and of ourselves, and then connecting and meeting the other person from that place of, of being healthily selfish with our own connection to self, so that we can then, from the overflow of of that connection to self, meet the other person and receive them fully. Because when we're not connected to ourselves properly, then we're receiving from a place of neediness. We're like, oh, I need this stuff to feel like as a right, good, whole human being in the world. And when we receive compliments that way, man, it's not empowering. It's not permanent. It's certainly not self-sustaining, and you're going to need it again soon. So that will be what creates that codependence in us. So, know that passion will wax and wane throughout any kind of long-standing connection. There'll be periods, maybe massive periods of time, where we don't necessarily feel turned on by that other person, but we can shortcut that stuff instead of, it's like riding a wave, right? Like, obviously you can only ride when the waves are coming in, but if you learn to surf well and learn to stay up on the board by being in full touch with what turns you on, so that you can maintain your own turned onness without requiring the other person to turn you on, that will lead us to far, far deeper levels of pleasure and long-standing, loving connection with those that we want to connect with. So I'll leave it at that, guys. Do check out Esther Perel's talk on it. I can put a couple of links down below if you like, to her talks at TED. Very, very amazing woman, and I love what she goes on about. I'm definitely a stand for what her message is in the world as well. So that's it for today, guys. Love and success to you and yours. Thank you for watching Ideas Sex Live, and we'll see you tomorrow.